Good evening, everyone. It is the Women Wise podcast. And unfortunately, tonight, it looks like I might be on my own. Well, with a guest, luckily, but I'm not just talking to myself. But we have an amazing guest for you tonight. We have a very special lady who's been here, well, much longer than most people I know, actually, and one of the original business coaches in Dubai. So a very, very warm welcome to Tricia Evans. Tricia, hello.
Oh, hi, Sarah. Nice to be here.
You are very welcome to the podcast. I'm actually delighted that you're on because you were one of the first people I spoke to when I moved here. And you gave me some great advice, which I have followed. And so I think it'd be lovely to introduce you to the audience. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, well, you said I'm a business coach. That's what I do here. That's my job. And I was the first coach in the UAE. And that was in 1993. I came here. So I've been here 30 years. And so it was a big deal. I had a big celebration sort of last year. And I mean, gosh, Dubai in 1993 was another world, totally another world. And so I lived in Dubai for 23 years and then I moved up to Ras Al Khaimah. So I live up here now. But I've actually had a sort of very healthy business as a coach throughout that time, actually. And from the days when people would be, they saw it as remedial. You know, you say hi and they say, what do you do? I say, well, I'm a business coach. And they'd sort of go, whoa, nothing wrong with me. You know, and you think, wow, they're thinking it's remedial, but it's not. It's a fantastic fast track tool. And it's brilliant to see coaching growing, and it's brilliant. We've now got hundreds, probably thousands actually of coaches in the UAE. Definitely hundreds.
We definitely have a lot. I was at a networking event this morning and I think there was 20 odd women there. Yeah. I would say 80% were coaches in some way, shape or form.
Yeah, and they are, and it's great that the profession's growing. I think we all need a coach at different stages for different things in our life, be it a golf coach or a sports coach or a business coach or a parenting coach or whatever. And it's great to see, or a health coach. So it's great to see it. Great to see it evolve. So I'm very proud that I was the first one here. So it's great.
So tell me, because I'm extremely curious about how did you actually get into coaching? Like, how did that even sort of surface as an option for you?
Well, background sort of sales and marketing with Unilever. So left university, keen young graduate trainee, joined Unilever. And it was fantastic for training. You know, the graduate training scheme, so that's really good. Worked with great people. You know, I learned to do things like make presentations, run meetings, all that sort of basic stuff. And to be honest, I thought everybody got that when they started work. So it was a bit of a shock when I left Unilever and realized they didn't. But I worked for Walls Ice Cream, and I can distinctly remember after about 5 years, I was in sales and marketing. I just thought, you know, I really don't care how much ice cream we sell. It just doesn't matter. And I thought I need to do something that matters. And for a while, I worked in the industry education link area, helping undergraduates who were looking for a career. Oh, hi, Janine.
Janine popped in.
Yeah, it's great. But yeah, so I worked at a bit industry education link, and then I worked at a business school. I moved to a business school in England, and it blew my mind. It was fantastic. It suddenly introduced me to the whole idea of coaching and how if you create an environment in which people want to learn and grow, that's 1,000 times more powerful, where you're trying to fill them up with information as though they're an empty bucket. And that just blew my mind. And I just, you know, when you sort of think, this is what I want to do. And I really did. But and so when I moved to Dubai, I came to join my ex-husband now, actually came to join him. And I knew that was a time I was making such a big change in my life anyway. I wanted to go freelance and did it then. So that's when I started. So
that's amazing. And so who would be your sort of typical client? Is there a typical client that you have, or are they, you know, do they vary across different ages and professions and things like that?
They vary totally across ages and professionals, but they're in general senior leaders. They're the ones I have. I work in the corporate. Probably about 40% of my work's in the corporate. So that could be I could be coaching a country manager who's been groomed for, I don't know, a global job or something, or it could be a woman who's running her own business, or someone who wants to leave corporate and start their own business, or someone who wants to get promoted or get a new job. It's always at that transition time. The things that people don't tell you about, you know where you want to be and you sort of know where you are, but you don't know how the heck to get there. And I think that's where coaching is really, really valuable.
Absolutely. So. Hi, Janine. Welcome. Glad you were a bit late. I was like, oh, am I going to be on my own tonight? Which would be absolutely perfectly fine, of course, because Tricia's great to talk to. But so in terms of one of your sort of sayings is very much about be successful on purpose. Do people sort of accidentally get successful, or is there's obviously a bit more to that? So just can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, well, I mean, that came with working with people. My experience is that success is never an accident. It rarely just happens, you know. I mean, you might do something that's sort of interesting or whatever, but to be successful on purpose, don't guess, you know, don't guess. Don't spend years of your life doing the same old stuff or doing stuff that's taking you nowhere, or, you know, you think, oh my gosh, what did I waste that time doing? And I have a very simple sort of model, if you like, for coaching. I mean, coaching really isn't rocket science. It's just a series of incredibly helpful conversations that help you shift from where you are and where you want to get to be. So the people who try and make it complicated or difficult, it's not. It's not difficult, but it's that doesn't mean that it's easy for people to sort of go through the process. But it's about, okay, I like to get people to really get clear where they're starting from. You know, who are you? What do you stand for? What's your belief system? What's your value system? You know, I often work with people who are working in an organization and their values are being trampled over left, right, and center, but they haven't bothered to articulate and name their values. And then they don't think, how can I line up and match with a company? So I get people to think about where they're starting from and who they are and whatever. And then what are you aiming at? What's the dream? You know, what? And then once you've got that sense of shift, it's right, okay, what do we now need to do to achieve that? Not random stuff, that. And that's where coaching fits. And so then I become the accountability partner. And actually, several clients have described me as their secret weapon recently, which I think is I think that's rather nice. I'm quite proud of that.
I love it. I normally get called a witch.
Yeah, I've been called that too.
Well, that's interesting because Janine's an accountability partner too. So I think it's a growing area, because I think a lot of people, they want to make the changes, but they can't. And maybe they start, but then they don't continue. They kind of don't have that momentum.
Yeah, it's really hard to stay motivated. You know, it's easier to get a nice smoky eyeshadow rather than staying motivated. And I think that's what makes coaches and accountability partners so powerful. It's really amazing. And I think, you know, leadership is not about titles or positions or the number of people you have reporting to. It's about making a positive impact in the world. And it actually starts with leading yourself first. And that's what you've mentioned earlier as well, is who you are, what's your vision, so it really resonates with what you're saying, Tricia. And your background is absolutely fascinating. My question here is, what has this journey taught you about living consciously and on purpose?
Well, gosh, at every level in my life, I like to think I practice what I preach as well. I mean, just simple things like, say, being a mum. I've got a 26-year-old daughter, and I've been a single mum since she was 5 months old. Now, I'm one of life's master planners. I didn't plan that. That was definitely not on my master plan. But you know, shit happens to everybody, and but it's how you deal with it. And so simple things like being a mum. I thought, well, for me, it's never been about, I don't know, pretty dresses or doing different things or having a beautiful child. It's about raising an adult who contributes to society and raising an adult who makes a difference. And I think then you take a fundamentally different view of how you raise a child and what you do and the things you expose them to, if you like. And I think it's like that in business. I don't think you can be effective as a leader if you don't know who the heck you are. If you're just doing random, you know, the same old stuff you've done for years. And, you know, it's crazy. I think anyone's got a bit of a nerve to try and lead anyone until they know themselves well. So so that's always where I start, to say, let's get clear that you know who you are. What do you stand for? What's your value system? What's your reward? What's your sense of integrity? How do you live your life? You know, but I like to think whatever I do, I'm very clear. I've always had like a master plan for my life, if you like, and that can change and evolve. But I am a planner. I like to have a plan. I don't function without a plan, but I'm perfectly capable of throwing the plan away if something better comes along, and have done on various occasions. So, but yeah, so very purposeful, I think. So, you know, if you're going to get a job, want a new job, for example, you're like a product. What is it that you bring to any role that maybe, you know, and how does that align with what the company needs? And what's your value system? And let's look at the value system of the different companies, because they're all different, and what aligns. Because if the fit's right and you're working with people who think sort of similar or similar levels of integrity to yourself, it's fantastic. And I always refer to that as if you're with people who get it, life is so easy. And if you're with people who are on a completely different planet and plane, life's pretty tough. And my experience is that it's funny because men and women do approach things differently, as a sweeping generalization. Men usually need a reason. So they want to get promoted. They want to, they've just got a new job. They want to fast track it. They want to, I don't know, whatever. They want to do something specific. Whereas women might often say, I'm just not comfortable with where I am in life. I don't quite know then. And so then that makes them sort of vague if they're going for jobs. So it's a different start point. Doesn't mean the sessions, you can do lots of the same things in the sessions, but the start point is usually different. And women seem to suffer a lot more from, what do they call it? The mindset, the imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome. It's incredible.
Yeah. Is it called the Paula effect? Is that what it's called? It's a very good book. Which is, if you've got a job being advertised and there's 10 criteria, and a woman might meet 9 of those, she thinks, oh no, I haven't met enough. And a man might meet one of them and he's like, she'll go for it anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's a really interesting phenomenon. Do you obviously that's probably something that you coach people with as well. If they're transitioning and they're looking for something, to get over that sort of imposter syndrome and not being good enough.
It's working out where the voices in your head are coming from. And it's funny, I was with a client that it was a woman a couple of weeks ago, and she made several comments, disparaging comments about herself. And she's phenomenal, this woman. She's great. She's absolutely amazing. And I said, who the heck's talking to you in your head? And she sort of went, oh, what do you mean? What do you mean? And then she said, oh my gosh, it's my mum. And I thought, wow. And as parents, we put these voices in our kids' heads. And we really need to be careful about what we're doing. So, but it is, there's some great questionnaires I use to really start to explore what's going on in there. Because if you've got these self-limiting beliefs, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot every time. And my experience is that women do that more than men, a lot more than men. So sometimes it's just getting over that and just being clear, where are you starting from? What's going on? Is that valid? That might have been valid when you were 5. Is it still valid now? 40 or whatever, and invariably not. So, and I'm a great believer in once you name something, you can deal with it. If you never name it, it lurks and it just trips you up. It'll definitely come back and get you. So,
it becomes toxic. It needs to get out. It needs to get away from your mind. And it's very true. It's very true. That's why it's always good to, whatever's going on here, just write it down. Just get it out, no matter if it's good or bad. I do believe that it does help getting clarity, getting the fogginess away so that you can focus on you as a person.
Yeah, sort of some people journal. I'm known as the flip chart queen. If there's things going on in my head, I need to map it out. And for me, there's something, the bigger the paper, the bigger my thinking. And the more interconnected it is. Whereas if I'm in just a little book, my thinking tends to be linear. So I do like a flip chart for that. And so I'm known for multicolored pens and flip charts and diagrams, and I've got them all over I'm very visual. But journaling is brilliant.
Flip charts after this, because that's a very powerful statement to say. The bigger the paper, the bigger the ideas. I never actually thought of that before, but it's so true, isn't it? You always limit. It's like being a goldfish, isn't it? You're going to be as limited as the space that you're living in. And you
can see the interconnections, and and you can connect and think, oh, that and that. And if I'm running a workshop with anybody, and especially teams, I'll always get them drawing. They'll always be on the floor drawing a big piece of flip chart paper, thick pens, and drawing, and it's amazing what comes out. It's so powerful. It's not about artistic ability. It's about a message. Draw how this team functions now, something about it, and draw how you'd love it to work. Powerful as anything. Powerful. And
it actually makes me think of don't be afraid to give up the good to actually go and get the great.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Not easy, but doable.
And I think, again, naming it. One guy, a friend's husband once said to me, I said, oh, well, I'd like to, I forget what I was targeting, corporate or something. And I said, oh, I'd like to do this and I'd like to do that and I'd like to do the other. And he said, well, why don't you then? and I sort of went, Oh. Oh, and actually that's written on my notice book. Why don't you then?
Yeah.
And you know, and you just think, wow. And sometimes somebody naming stuff or saying something, oh, it's so powerful. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, we complicate life, and we don't. It doesn't need to be complicated.
Absolutely. I heard it being called as ising it. You call it as it is.
I'm writing that down. I'll nick that. As is.
It's not original. Sorry, I stole it. I'm like a magpie. I steal everyone else's ideas. But I love that. You know, just as is it. Just say it as it is. You know, whatever that thing is that's not being named, as you said. You know, call it out.
Like
because we do hide, don't we? We hide. We've got all these different excuses, different reasons. You know, why we're not doing things.
Yeah.
But I mean, imagine. I mean, you must have been one of the early women here then who was a single mum as well, and that must have been hugely challenging. How did you cope with that?
Well, yes, it was hugely challenging, but again, I'm a planner. I thought through. So when, I mean, it was all very shattering at the time, and I look back now, and you know, you sort of think, geez, how did I sort of cope with that loss? But you know, you start to think, right, okay, how am I going to deal with this? And I decided in the end it was going to be a lot easier to be a single mum in the UAE than it was back in the UK. I come from a very strong, very connected family, but they're busy. They're all working. I wouldn't have had support from that angle. My mum maybe, but so I thought, right, no, and I thought, what do I need in place to make this work? And I think any single, it's usually mums, but there were some single dads as well. Any single parent needs to have a bulletproof backup, absolutely bulletproof. So you know, so I got that in place. I mean, I had a fantastic. In 23 years in Dubai, I had 3 housekeepers, and I call them housekeepers. They were not maids; they were housekeepers who could drive. And you know, and they, you know, and we talked a lot. They knew my vision for raising Sean. They knew my vision for the house. They knew it was a great relationship. I'm still in touch with all 3 of them and their families, and you know, whatever. You know, and it's great, and it's so important to do that. So I think you need that in place. And then I do have a fantastic family. I've got 4 brothers, so I was raised as a boy, really. So you know. And Dad was a PE teacher, so I was raised as a sporty boy.
I was going to say, so competition is just in your blood then. That's it, you know, being competitive.
Easy, yeah, piece of cake.
Bring it on.
I know, and yeah, I've been injured for a while, and I'm back on the badminton court now, and it still tickles me to death that I'm beating everybody. So not that I'm keeping score at all, you know. So
no, we can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but going back to the single parenting, it's interesting because when Sean was about, my daughter Sean, when she was about, I don't know, 10 or something, I hosted something at my place for single mums, and there were 15 of us, and it was just an amazing evening. And we sort of went round and said, what's your story? And, you know, there were some common elements and others different. But there were 2 things that came out loud and clear that were different, that seemed to be different about single parents and then people with, you know, 2 parents and a child. And the first was sheer resilience. Absolute resilience, and I think that was startlingly obvious from everybody. And the second one, there was a sort of different dynamic than you would normally have, and so many of them actually had a name. Like I've always said about me and my daughter, we're more than just mother and daughter. We're like a really small gang. And several of them had used that idea of a gang. And one woman had 2 sons, and she said, we're the 3 musketeers. And it was almost like this little team thing. It was really very interesting. So, but that was great. But it was brain focusing. But in some ways, it's easy. I mean, you know, it was my rules. And I had 1 child, and she was easy. And, you know, people who are married, they've got the dynamics with their partner. They've got the dynamics about kids playing mum and dad off against each other. I didn't have those dynamics. So in some ways, it was tougher, a lot tougher. In other ways, it was easier. So,
yeah.
But I think it's, again, you know, this is the situation. This is what's happening. How do I make this work? What do I want? I want this child to grow up, and I've never been more sure of anything in my life that it was going to be me who raised her and not a nanny or a housekeeper. So I thought, right, okay, and I was pretty much self-financing as well in Dubai, which is tough. And so, right, okay, so then I focus, instead of thinking, oh, how am I going to do this? It's right, how am I going to make this work really well? And you shift, and I use that with coaching clients as well. You shift the problem they're trying to solve. You must find that, Janine, all the time with accountability.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, they're trying to do something from the old days or whatever, and it's okay. Let's shift what we're talking about here. Let's shift the problem.
It's actually beautiful to witness, because sometimes the answers are right in front of the client, So it's really beautiful to see that transition. It actually makes me think of that one quote as well. She believed she could, so she did, and that's exactly. It's exactly what you did, Tricia. And sometimes as women, we feel like we have to do everything ourselves, and it's important to know that you need that support. So how can we as females overcome this and build strong support networks? What tips would you give to our listeners?
First of all, it's thinking what you need. It's funny, I said before I've got 4 brothers, and then when the first one of my brothers got married, that was a sister I'd never had, and she introduced me to the power of the sisterhood, and it was fantastic, and I've really never looked back since. And in fact, in the early days of Dubai, I mean, these days there's amazing networking groups across Dubai, really amazing. There's a great choice. There's really good people running, great sessions. It's fantastic. In those days, there weren't. There was a coaching group that I'd set up, a little group where we called ourselves the Professional Coaches Network. And then there was the International Businesswomen's Group. And I was on the committee of that for about 8 years. And I set up one in Abu Dhabi, the International Businesswomen's Group. And that one's still going strong. And that was in 1994, set that up. So first of all, it's recognizing just by having a gang of people you can talk to, and some of those women from the International Businesswomen's Group, and this is back in the 90s, they're still some of my best friends to this day, because you get really connected. And my best friend lives in Dubai. She's a psychotherapist, and I used to we met when the kids were at nursery, because it's funny as a mum, just because you've got kids the same age doesn't mean you get on with the other parents. And and then every so often you'll find a parent who you really click with, and that's very powerful. And so this friend of mine for 10 years, for longer, for about 15 years, every Tuesday morning at 5:30 in the morning, we'd meet on the beach at near Jumeirah Beach Hotel, and we'd walk down to Dusk and back. It was an hour and a half, and you got a psychotherapist and a business coach, 2 single mums with daughters the same age. Wow, it was like an hour and a half of therapy a week. Wonderful. And women in particular,
all the problems of the world in that hour and a half.
Amazing. It's a thing. When I moved up to Ras Al Khaimah, that's the biggest thing I missed from Dubai. I've sort of replaced it. I go kayaking every Friday morning with a close friend here, and that's but that hour and a half and talking. We need to talk things out. I think women in general, we can solve our own problems once we just articulate it. And if we articulate it to someone who's not going to cut you off and say, "Well, I think you should do this," someone who's just going to listen and just be there and just get it. And and I think so I think to be a single mum, you definitely need your networks. You definitely need to know where you need help. I was crystal clear that I wasn't going to do everything, because people used to say, "Oh, you're a real super mum, you're doing everything." And I say, well, I'm not. But I'm clear what I do. My number one job, raise Sean. Number one job, non-negotiable, number one. My number 2 job, being a coach, because I've got to finance it all. My number 3 job was I was on the board of a charity called Gulf for Good, still going strong in Dubai. I was on the board for 11 years, and voluntary position, and just my absolute passion. It's about giving kids a chance around the world, and in particular, educating girls. It's just like mega. It's just mega. And so I absolutely love that. So I wanted to do that. And I'm also a massive traveler. I'm a big adventure traveler, and passionate adventure traveler myself. And like 2 years ago, in fact, to this almost 2 years ago, this week, I was in the Arctic running my own dog sled team, and all sorts of stuff. But I wanted to do those 4 things, and other things I didn't. So I had a PA for 18 years who was my total blood pressure lowerer. She was I love that woman to bits, till the day till the day I die, because she was so amazing. She just took so much pressure off me. And then I always had a great housekeeper who could drive. So if there was an emergency, I could say, I need Sean picked up from school because I'm stuck somewhere, or whatever. And so you get your ducks lined up, you get your support system lined up. And it's not a weakness, it's a strength. And I say sometimes to people, I say, look, of course you can clean the kitchen floor and all the rest of it. And I'm sure you're really good at it. But actually, at the end of the day, wouldn't you rather be making an impact in a different way? If that's what you want to do it. But I think
that's such a powerful thing to share with the audience, because I do think that there is a lot of pressure on women to do it all, to have it all and to do it all. Actually, I heard a very good sort of comeback to that was, well, yes, you can have it all, but not at the same time.
I like that.
And you better pick your battles, because yes, not everything should be on your shoulders. And I think that whole thing of it comes back to values, doesn't it, and priorities, and what's important to you. But I think that's a really important thing to share, that you can, why not have a PA, why not have someone, have a housekeeper, why not have someone to help you with those things, because they're not going to define your daughter. That those things are not going to impact her, but you being there and being available, absolutely.
Yeah, and the time with it, Golf for Good, that charity. I mean, I think in total, I still think we raised nearly $5 million, and we've built and renovated literally hundreds of schools, orphanages, homes for street kids. Now, I could have been cleaning my kitchen floors, and instead I chose to do that, to enable that. And I think that's infinitely more powerful. I think women are so powerful, it's not true. And I think we decry our power so often. And we don't recognize how powerful we are and how impactful. So, but it's, but you need to decide what you want. Decide if you're going to be a mother, decide what sort of a mother you want to be. If you're going to be a leader, decide what sort of leader you want to be. If you're going to be a coach, decide what sort of a coach you want to be. If you're going to be whatever it is, decide what coach you want to be. Decide what sort of thing you want to be. And then do the stuff that makes you that.
And just coming back to that whole thing about being a leader, because I used to be an engineer. That was my original life up until 24 years ago. So I haven't worked for someone else for 24 years. I've been running my own business. I don't think I'm employable now, actually. I think I've gone beyond someone being able to tell me what to do. But one of the things that I noticed was that, especially in a technical field, you can be really good at the technical aspect of your job. And then because you're good at that, you get promoted into a completely different skill set, which is dealing with people and managing people. So because you're dealing with a lot of people transitioning, do you come across that a lot, that people don't have the skills to be, they might have their own vision, but they don't know how to translate that into their team?
All the time. And I think sometimes with coaching, I bet you both find this in your work as well, that life goes through different stages and jobs go through different stages. And I mean, so in terms of a role, when you first start a job, it's all about individual contribution. It's about just learning the ropes, learning what you're doing, being good, and people can absolutely excel. Certain types of people excel at that stage. So you can be an amazing engineer, for example, and then you get promoted to run a team. And nobody actually tells you, but that requires a totally different skill set. And what you're judged on is totally different. And I see, for example, I've coached, there's a lot of head teachers in Dubai who I've coached. They were teachers or heads of year or whatever, and they're now heads of the school. You can be the best teacher on the planet. It doesn't make you a good head teacher. You can be the best engineer on the planet. It doesn't make you a good team leader or project manager across massive, influencing people. And it's about thinking, okay, this is what you need to learn now. This is what you need to factor in. And I find that all the time. And also, so stages of a job, a lot of the people I coach, they're already running teams, and then they get promoted, and basically they're then leading leaders who they themselves are running their own teams. And then you get promoted further, and it's all about global thinking and strategic and joining the dots. And unless you think, right, what are you judged on in that job? What's valued? Then it's so easy for people to carry on doing the same thing. And then they get absolutely flattened or feel flattened because they're used to being great at something, and suddenly they're not. But that's where coaching, I'm sure you find that, the two of you, that's where coaching can be so powerful, because you've got somebody who's pretty kick-ass at something, and actually they just need to learn a few other skills or bring them to the fore more, and then they're phenomenal then, but they wouldn't have been before. And I think the other thing that I find people need, it's about your age matters as well, because if you're in your teens, I mean, I don't usually coach people in their teens, but teens is full of angst. 20s, you're finding out who the heck you are. Your 30s can be quite a hard work decade, because often you're going places at work, so it's harder work. If you may be getting married, you may be having kids, all that sort of stuff. So that's tough. It's a bit of a squeeze sort of decade. Your 40s, you start to come into your own. A little bit sort of like, relaxing into this. Your 50s, you probably got to, but you are starting to get teenagers then if you've got kids. Your 50s, you definitely, again, coming into your own, but maybe your parents are getting older then. So maybe there's external pressures come in. And you start to look and see what happens. Then 60s, I mean, they say that the 60s and 70s are the happiest decades of most people's life, because it's almost like
left home.
your kids have left home, your parents may be dead, whatever. Not that's a good thing, but you haven't got the pressures on you that you have at different age. And I think sometimes for women in particular, because we tend to be the anchor person for if the home, for example, everything. We will do the thinking, the planning, the organizing, the sorting. Other people may help, which drives me mad, actually. If you've got a partner, you're co-parenting, you're co-running a house, you whatever. Anyway, that's a particular beef of mine. But it's about thinking where you are and being. That's what I mean about understanding who you are, where you fit, where you are in your life, and what you want. It's not difficult, but we get busy, so busy, and sometimes you're so busy you haven't got time to. Hardly got time to shower, let alone think about what you want to do with your life, So it's about, and that's where coaching can help to stop, think, focus, decide what you want, and then usually it helps to put in habits that really make it easy for you to do it. So
Janine's all about the habits, aren't you, Janine? You're all about the good habits.
Yeah, exactly. You're thinking, we're so used to doing the same things.
Yeah.
And it's as soon as we can change those things and do different habits, it will change so many things.
It does.
And it's just, as you said earlier, just to have that shift of actually changing certain things. And I'm not talking about doing massive changes, because then you're going to get distorted. Do small baby steps and change those habits to actually streamline everything else that goes on in your life. And yet again, it's not easy, but it comes back having that supportive community, having people that's really lighting your fire, which that makes a big impact. Trish, you've got so much experience. Like it feels like you are the first coach of the first of everything. I want to ask you, where do you see the future for female leadership, not just in Dubai, but globally? What are some of the existing trends that you see emerging that we're not aware of?
Well, I must admit, I'm happy about the trends I see. I think the world needs more women running the show, be it a country, be it a company, be it, we're used to running the home, but I mean, it's a bit of a mess, the world, isn't it? And a lot of companies are a bit of a mess. And, I work in so many companies. I'll often have somebody and often it's women, deeply unhappy because, and you start listening to their story, and they're in a staggeringly toxic environment. And I think to be a good leader, a good leader is making sure that you're not creating a toxic environment, that it's genuinely equal. So people talk about diversity and inclusion and, the numbers, but I mean, it's all very well to talk about it, but what are you putting in place? What habits, what systems, what processes are you putting in place to make it fairer? I think women in general, I think we're much more collaborative by nature. And I think we listen infinitely better than guys do. And it's much less likely to be a hierarchical structure. It's much more likely to, how are we win-win thing as opposed to win-lose. And I see this with women all the time. But in general, we live in a man's world in most of the cases. And I've always said to all the guys I coach, every man on the planet should work in an organization that's all women and just them. And they all sort of go, "Whoa, yeah, that'd be fun." And I say, it wouldn't.
I was going to say,
it really wouldn't, because the norm is not yours. And that's what most women deal with in any business context every single day of their working life. The rules are set by other people, and it's sort of, and it's changing, and I do work with some companies that are mainly women, and they feel different. It's definitely very different feel. But so often women get put off, and this whole glass ceiling. And yes, sometimes it's because women aren't being promoted. But a lot of women I know sort of say, not for me, I'm off. Not my world. I'll create my own thing. And we saw that in the Businesswomen's Group in Dubai, literally in the 90s and the 2000 to 2010. I think it started off, there was about 80-90% of women in corporate jobs, and we grew like crazy, and by the end it was something like about 70% of the people there were running their own thing, doing their own thing. And it was such a trend of saying, this isn't working for me, I'm going to create my own thing. And I think because then in general I find women more values driven, although they can't always articulate the values. And I think where we need to get a lot better is in communicating clearly what, you know, the value of that. I mean, I think COVID was interesting. Some of the countries we saw, you know, women running the countries managed COVID very differently. You know, and I'm not a women good, men bad type person at all. I think the collaboration, I think we've got so much to offer, but actually we are definitely operating in men's rules still. And I think the more we can balance that out, and I do see a shift. And I coach I coach phenomenal people, but you know, some of the women I coach are just wow, just impressive as hell, you know. And it's a privilege. I feel immensely privileged doing what I do. It's great, and it's the thing I learned about coaching. Coaching is never ever about the coach ever.
Yep.
It's about what we enable, what it's empower. And I think if there's one word I'd like people to think about me, if I'm, you know, once I've gone or once I'm away or not in the thing, it's that, you know, I empowered. I'm a mentor to, I know, 10 to 15 people at any one time, any given time. And it's, you know, I feel as though I've done that with my daughter, sort of literally created a platform and she could sort of fly from there. Actually, Sarah knows this. My daughter ended up a tandem skydive instructor, which wasn't quite what I had in mind when I was here.
I throws myself out of airplanes.
Exactly. She's done 800 jumps, and but anyway, she's not doing that now. But I mean, but she's a phenomenal young woman in her own right. And I'm very happy about this generation because I think they're doing some great things. They think very differently. So sorry, that was a very long-winded answer to the question about where do I see women. I said there's not enough of us involved and not enough of us there yet, but it's moving in a good direction. And I think the more we get involved, the more we're involved in running genuinely, collaboratively running businesses and countries, the better this world will be.
I absolutely love that answer.
So Lynn, my mum, is on, and she said, totally agree, the world needs more women in charge of everything.
Hi, Lynn, I remember you well.
But Tricia, you mentioned something in your beautiful answer, and that was diversity. And I read something earlier today from Dr. Mandy Zimmerman, where she's saying that, you know, embracing culture diversity is indeed a big part of business success in the UAE, and understanding and respecting that local culture is key to build strong relationships and those trusted relationships and circles to actually achieve those successes. What's your thinking around something like that? Do you agree?
Yes is the answer. Yes, I do agree, but with a sort of a condition on it. I've literally been in the UAE 30 years now, and probably my favorite thing is that in any one day I would interact with at least 10 different nationalities. You know what it's like. You go to a meeting, and if there's 20 people there will be 15 different nationalities. And that's phenomenal, and it's sort of humbling, and it's amazing, and it just rattles your cage every day. You think, oh my God, yeah, this is incredible. So it's been my absolute favorite thing. On the other side, at times it's been my least favorite thing about the country, because, you know, we all have moments when we think, oh, why can't they all just think like me? You know, and sort of, you know, life would be so much easier, you know, for me. So it can be tricky. And yes, sure, embrace the local culture, but not everything about the local culture is great. Like not everything about any culture is great. And I think when they talk about culture shock, it's called shock for a reason, because cultures aren't randomly different. They can be polar opposites, and they're literally completely polar opposites. So you might breeze into a situation thinking you're being respectful, and actually it's totally disrespectful to the other person, and vice versa. You know, and just one simple example. Now, it doesn't happen so much now, but literally in about the first week I was here, my ex-husband was the boss of PricewaterhouseCoopers, and we used to go to all these fancy do's, you know, and I was, you know, the wife, and so went along. And then the first local guy I met, of course, in my culture, a sign of respect is to shake hands. And men, women, you know, whatever, or in a business context. So I went to shake hands with a local guy. And you can probably imagine what I'm going to say. He stepped back, put his hand behind his back. And, you know, and literally, if he'd smacked me around the face, I couldn't have been more surprised. And I can distinctly remember thinking, on a worldwide sample of one, all these local guys are brood buggers, sort of, and ridiculous. Now, obviously, I then thought, what was happening then? Because that was so shocking. And then I found that it was probably extremely disrespectful of me to do that. And he was showing me respect by not doing it. And so that stage one is actually understanding why. Stage two is then for 30 years, every time I meet a local guy, I say, do you shake hands? And then some of them say, of course I do, I want a hug, and then others sort of say, no, and then you just laugh and it's a joke and it's easy and it's gone and it's no longer an issue. And I think there's an awful lot of things that we could solve by doing that, by understanding. And sometimes I see that work brilliantly. And other times we don't seek to understand. And then it's just a standoff. And we can all make snide comments about, Brits are always like that. Or, South Africans do that. Indians all do that. And we can all do it and we're all guilty of it. But I think the more we can collaborate and really get it, where other people are coming from and say, what can we do that's really the best here? I think the better. And that includes the locals, of course. So yes, all for it, but manage it.
Absolutely.
I think it's very, very true. And I think often people come here and they don't necessarily have any kind of training in what it's like to live in a Middle Eastern country. And it is a Muslim country, it's a Middle Eastern country. I mean, it's very liberal, it's very conservative, it's not extreme in many ways. And I think it's quite interesting, this show, because obviously people watch it around the world as well. And part of our aim is actually to showcase that women living here can have incredible lives. Rather than, a lot of people have this assumption, you're living in Dubai, don't you have to cover up, don't you have to kind of walk behind a man? And, it's like, actually, no, this is, I think, and this, we spoke the other day before coming on here. And one of the things was just how incredible the women are and what they've achieved, is. And it's just interesting to just kind of backtrack a little bit. You were talking about how a lot of women will go, this is toxic, I'm out of here. And then they'll go and do something themselves and they'll set up their own business. Do you think that's more common amongst women then than men to sort of do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Dramatically more common. Dramatically. It's it's much more unusual for a man to do that. It's certainly of the guys I meet. So maybe they say it as more of a risk. I don't know.
It's just interesting to sort of see that, because everyone obviously we've had on the podcast are entrepreneurs. They own their own businesses. They run their own, enterprises, and everyone's been amazing. Everyone's got their own, story and sort of challenges that they faced. What do you think your biggest challenge has actually been then? Over the 33 years as a coach, what would you say the thing that you've had to really overcome, and how did you do it?
I think it was juggling it all, really, and sort of and constantly juggling it, because it is. I mean, that's what, being a single mum. It would have been great to have a partner, sort of, at certain times to ease the load, things like that. And I think to constantly evolve, because I think that's super important. If I was still doing now the same as I was doing 30 years ago. Well, I mean, coaching has evolved, the world has evolved, the context has changed, and I'm a total and utter learning junkie. And I'm sure you two are too. There isn't a day goes by when I'm not listening to a podcast or reading or learning from people or, learning from clients or whatever. And I think to stay there and to stay visible and to stay, and so then it is juggling it all. How do you keep on learning, keep the clients coming in? And if you work for yourself, you have to be every bit as good at marketing as you are at doing the thing. So for me, I have to be as good a marketeer as I am a coach. And I think anyone who runs their own business, that's probably the biggest shock. Because especially if you work in a company, in a structured organization, where basically you're implementing and there's a structure set for you, you do things, whatever, and suddenly you're working from home, nobody's telling you to do anything, nobody knows who the heck you are, and no one knows what you're doing, and suddenly you go, wow, where do I start? And I suppose it's keeping that focus all the way through and keeping it juggled, keeping myself sane, raising a daughter, a kick-ass daughter, and the visibility as well. So I suppose it's the juggle. I suppose the short answer is juggling it all.
It's we can be CEOs. That is amazing if people can just have that mind shift. Because we can be nurturing mothers and we can also be fierce competitors. I mean, it's amazing where things have changed and how things have changed. And I think if we have a week, I think you can tell us so many different stories, Tricia, from what you've been through with your coaching experience.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's super important, and it's a common thread, the people you spend your time with, it's fundamental to how successful you'll be. If you spend time with people who say, oh, you can't do that because we tried that in 2006 and it didn't work then, you will become like them. And that whole thing, I think it was a Harvard study, whatever, but think of the 5 people you spend most time with. And it is so true. Oh my goodness. And that's one thing I always ask my clients, who do you spend most time with? Tell me what they're like. And women, far more so than guys, I think women will stay friends and spend time with people that they shouldn't, or that they should really gently ditch. They can say, oh, well, they're so nice, they're so lovely, and they're having a hard time. And then they get sort of, the victim, and they spend time with people in victim mode. And, oh, poor me, poor me. And actually, it's catching. It's catching. Energy is catching. And all of us, this is part of knowing yourself. You walk in a room and you bring in a certain energy. And there are certain types of people who will tune into your energy and certain types of people who will absolutely not. And I think that's part of knowing yourself. And it's funny because I use a lot of personality profiles and questionnaires because I think they're useful to give a language to sort of create a structure, and then you can start a conversation. And, and I've always used that stuff with my daughter since she was quite young. And she must have been about 13. And she said, Mom, I've been thinking. She said, I'm never going to be loud like you are. So I went, oh, thank you for that bit of feedback. And then she said, but I'm really happy being me. And I thought that was fantastic. And I thought, well, that's where I'd like us all to get to. Be happy being you, know what works and know what doesn't, and then make a conscious choice. If you know something that you do really upsets people, then you have a choice. You can either stop doing it or you can think, couldn't be bothered, I'm still carrying on. But at least you have a choice. But once you start to think about these things and aware about these things, and my whole thing with anything I do with coaching, it's shift from unconscious behavior to making truly conscious choices, and conscious choices that move you towards whatever it is you want to do with your life. So but I thought her saying that just
that's brilliant. I love that.
Actually, yeah.
Reminds me of us saying, I can't think who it was who said it was, stay away from negative people because they always find a problem to your solution.
So true. So true. And I actively, I've got a really inner core of friends, and it's so lovely. They're just my energy people. They make me smile. It's all over just thinking about them. Because you just come away feeling inspired and feeling great, and I think more than anything else, seen. And I think as a coach, I try and make, if I'm working with, be it a team or individuals, because I do a lot of team coaching as well, I want to make that space safe. And again, I know I'm saying a lot about men and women, but I do see differences. Men in particular often don't have a safe space. Women more likely do. We're likely to have a best mate, or we're likely to have somebody who really just gets you and likes you, and you just feel better when you're around them. A lot of men don't have that. And so I think it's really important to create, for men, women, whoever, a space that's safe and where they feel absolutely seen for who they are and what they bring. And I think that's super important for kids as well. And I was very clear when I was raising Sean that I've always thought we all need other adults other than your parents that are safe enough to talk to. And I think that's always been important. But the safety is really important. And I think in particular, especially as things are going with more sort of more tech, more online, more sort of, a friend of mine is absolutely into the metaverse and, saying, oh, we'll all be coaching in our alternative metaverse, offices and stuff.
Really? I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there as well, Sarah. But but I'm listening. She does all this cool stuff. But it's just so important to have a safe space and feel that you can really, really be honest and really open up. Because if you don't feel safe, you don't talk, and then you don't fix anything, and you carry on doing the same stuff.
No, you're stuck. Really stuck. Yeah, you know, we as we evolve as well, we actually inspire the next generation to dream bigger and break any barrier that they might think they have, and also write their own remarkable stories, because we are all unique. And I absolutely love that your daughter is at that space where she's happy who she is. It would be an amazing world if we could.
13. That she said that at 13. That's incredible. Most 13-year-olds, you know, haven't got a clue who they are and don't want to be themselves, don't like who they are. They want to be like somebody else in the class. They want to be like, you know, the more popular kid. Or something that, especially on social media, I think it's playing a big role in lots of ways and not necessarily positive.
And if you look and see who most 13-year-olds hang out with, you start to see where it's all coming from. It's quite interesting. It's really important to know who your kids' friends are. Terribly important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's his name? I can't think. Gabor Mate. He's written some amazing books about parenting, and you know, that you should still be the main influence in your child's life. I think that's getting harder and harder, you know, for parents to do, because there's a big competition with these flipping things, you know. So yeah, it's very, very difficult. So just a little bit back to kind of coaching, though, kind of how it's kind of grown over the years that you've been a coach. What are sort of the positives and the negatives that you've seen then, kind of amongst coaching as a sort of industry?
Well, I think the positives are definitely that people are starting to realize where it can fit and where it can help. And I think that's great. And I love that. The negative has always been the barrier to entry is very low. And so almost anyone can be a coach. And there's a lot of people who think, oh, I like talking to people, I can be a coach. And they do a couple of weekend courses and bam, they're a coach. And I think it's dangerous. I really think it's dangerous, because if you're, again, I was talking, if you're trying to create this space that's safe to help people really feel seen and help them move forwards in whatever it is they want to move forwards in their life, and you've got someone who doesn't know what they're doing, or someone who thinks it's all about telling people. I think if you're coaching, I have a 90 or maximum sort of 15%, 10 to 15% coach talking, and 85 to 90% them talking. And if that balance shifts, you're not coaching, you're telling. And I think that if you track that with a lot of the coaches, the less thoughtful coaches, I think you'd find that it was a tell situation, much more. So that for me is the dangerous thing. And you know, and people who promise a load of stuff, and you see a lot of stuff on social media about, oh no, promising all sorts of stuff, and it's all about the coach and me, and did I mention me? Look how amazing I am, and me again. And you know, and you think, oh my god, you know, it's not about that at all.
I can't handle that at all, I have to say.
It's all about what we enable, and it's about empowering, and it's about you know, people should feel dramatically better and move forwards if they're working with a coach who gets them. Yeah. So that's
and it should be pretty quick as well. It shouldn't be something that takes weeks to get to that point. My golden rule is people have to be happy when they came in, when they leave than when they came in.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely
agree. My golden rule, you know, and you know, no matter what sort of point they're at in terms of, even if big emotions have come up, you know, okay, we can park that, but we need to make sure that they leave in a good frame of mind, because you know, other sort of systems, you can feel very raw afterwards, and I don't think that's necessarily you know,
I agree,
the best way to kind of be going back into the world and into your job or your family or things like that. So yeah, it was actually my first trainer sort of, you know, she instilled that in me as part of you know, how to be a coach. And do you train coaches yourself then? Are you a trainer? Do you get people sort of special?
No, don't
all
do
your
that.
All your wisdom, all your years of experience.
I was about to say, you've got so much to give. Come on.
Yeah, you'd be a fantastic trainer.
Well, it's been maybe no, but at the moment I don't. But yeah, maybe. I think that gets into the credentials and the qualifications, and that's not an area I'm very interested in doing. But you know, I'm involved in different coaching networks, and sort of and I do lots of talks. I get asked to talk to coaches a lot, and very happy to do that. But I think just a quick thing about what you said before is so important to leave people feeling happier, and for me it's about feeling happier and clearer. Really clear, you know, clear, and you know, life less complicated. And I think probably the word I hear most often since COVID is overwhelmed. And it's about cutting through that overwhelm so that they're really clear on what they're aiming at, very clear about how to get there. And then that's great. And it's terribly, terribly, terribly important to know the difference between coaching and therapy. Yep. Incredibly important. And and there's a definite grey area, there's a boundary. And I've sort of in the past, I've done sort of some training in terms of counselling and sort of healing work. But I'm not a therapist, and I never pretend to be. And I'm very clear. I know when there's a few times I've had clients and I think it's not a coach you need, it's a therapist. Because a therapist, when there's serious stuff that's keeping them back, that they really need to unravel and go through. Coaching is about moving forwards. But it's really important to know the difference. And some of the less experienced coaches can actually muddle that, and that's dangerous.
Really?
So,
Yeah.
Because you can open a can of worms, and if you don't know what to do, if the can of worms is open, that's dangerous.
Absolutely, you got to keep your clients safe and you safe as well. It's something that you've got to protect yourself as a coach too. So.
You do, and it's funny because normally I always have I broke the golden rule once. I have a chemistry call before I work with people, and I call it chemistry.
I like that.
Yeah, and I call it chemistry, but it works two ways.
That one down, that one.
Yeah, but of course it's them checking me out to say, can I work with this person? But I'm checking them out every bit as much, because I'm not interested in victims, because there's so many hours in a day, and I don't want to spend my time with people who are just in victim mode, and they're going to be there forever, whatever. And the one time I broke that, I thought, oh my goodness, I had this woman who was sort of like ringing and contacting like all hours of the day and night. And I said, right, okay. And I almost felt like I'd have to draw on a protective cloak, whenever I was near her, because she was like a leech. There's such a difference between somebody who's looking for a mother replacement, or somebody who's genuinely ready and is just overwhelmed and needs help to move forwards. But the vast majority of people, we've got it inside us, but sometimes we can help to unlock that. Yeah, we're lucky. Are we lucky doing what we do?
I love it. I can't imagine doing anything else, to be honest.
Exactly.
Definitely wouldn't go back to engineering, that's for sure. I've been decommissioned. I'm safe to go back into society. It's okay.
Well, you're a very sociable engineer, Sarah.
I can't believe we're coming up to the hour.
I'm just thinking, it's been such an amazing chat, and almost an hour past. It's crazy.
I know. As always, it flies. Time flies when you're having fun and you're listening to incredible women. So, Tricia, what would be your final piece of advice that you would give to the entrepreneurs, the women out there in Dubai and worldwide as well, but particularly in Dubai?
It's take that time to stop and think and decide what you want. Decide what would be a good life. How do you decide on the balance? It's not just about work. It's not in isolation. Look at it all, sort of look at the roles you play in your life. What's the balance you want of it? And really get that clear in your head. And then it's about, right, how to make that happen. And that's where the Be Successful on Purpose comes in, because I work with over the years, I've had various people wanted to go into partnership with me or sort of join. And I've always been very flattered, and I've always listened, and I've always, looked at it. But in each case, they were wanting different things. Like there was one really good friend of mine, actually. She said, I want to work my butt off, sleep about 5 hours a night, work my butt off for 20 years, make a fortune, and then run and, travel the world. And she's busy doing exactly that now. Now, I just had my daughter, and I thought, that's not my idea of a dream 20 years.
You might have only had 5 hours sleep a night, but that was not by choice.
That was not by choice, yeah. Yeah. But for me, it's always been about the balance. And I always think, is this going to work? Because I think I'm huge on self-care as well for clients and for me. I think, you cannot possibly be a good leader if your marriage is falling apart, if you're just about to have a heart attack, if you haven't seen your kids for the last 2 years, and, and everybody thinks you're a dick, sort of whatever. It's just not possible to be a good leader. So decide what you want, decide what your legacy wants to be, really think it through, and then figure it out. And a coach can help to fast track the process beautifully, as two of you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, amazing chat, amazing hour. Thank you so much. Tricia, just really, we could talk to you for another 2 hours. I don't think we would even really, we've really just scratched the surface. So, you never know. We'd love to have you back on maybe another time and, extract and squeeze a bit more wisdom out of you, because, your experience and what you've achieved is just incredible. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, thank you. Actually, just one final thing. One thing I would definitely retrain as in the next few years is a death doula. Do you know what a death doula is? It's somebody who helps people have a good death. And basically, it's planning. It's thinking through what, most people say, I want to die in my own bed, whatever. But most people don't. They die in a hospital wired for sound. And people talk about longevity. Longevity is about making the last 10 years of your life great, not sick and all the rest of it. A death doula can really help you plan and think, what do you want the end of your life to look like? So that's one of the things I'll do. So that's where I see bringing a lot of the wisdom in and just helping people make that. Again, that's a serious transition, isn't it?
Once you've trained in that, we're going to have you back.
Absolutely. But quickly before we end this podcast, just a reminder of our mission at the Women Life Postcard is really to empower and inspire women in Dubai, and obviously sharing their stories, and extraordinary women like Tricia here today. We really aim to redefine what it actually means to be successful. So Tricia, once again, it has been a fantastic conversation. There's certain things, when you say certain words, I get goosebumps because I can relate to so many things you've said tonight. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and your expertise. I think our listeners are just in awe of everything that you've shared tonight. And I'm sure your LinkedIn profile is going to get quite a lot of hits.
Great. I look forward to it. Thanks for the invitation. I think what you created here is great. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Janine.
Oh, no, you're very welcome. And thank you to our listeners, viewers. We didn't have too many tonight, but we always have lots on the recordings. And again, if you like what we've done and you found this podcast interesting, do consider buying Janine and I a coffee. There's a link down below underneath the video. That would be lovely, because we have big plans for the Women Wise podcast. It's not just going to be staying online. We've got all kinds of plans as we go through, and obviously that takes a little bit of funding as well. So from all of us here tonight, just want to say a big thanks again and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Okay.
Awesome.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.